If I can read it through my coffee. Commissioner Robinson, are you here?
Yes.
Commissioner Kennedy, are you here?
Here.
Commissioner Vines, are you here?
Here.
Commissioner Richardson, are you here?
Here.
Okay, and I am present. That constitutes a quorum of the committee. Commissioners, has anybody read the May 21st minutes? And if so, is there a motion regarding those?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Commissioners, this is the agenda before us. I have suggested that we begin with the compatible new construction policy discussion. It is now queued up. If there's any objection to starting with that and getting that out of the way? Okay, then let's do that, and our agenda will proceed
I know, the meeting that
as
just,
otherwise outlined.
okay, where are we going? What are we doing? Yeah, what are we doing?
New construction policy.
Okay.
Mr. Director, I am impressed at how you have made this the real focus of your tenure here and how much effort and enthusiasm you have put into this policy.
Well, I'm excited about it. I'm
Yes,
excited to talk to the board about it and the public.
excellent.
So, so the purpose of our,
You know, I can see you from here.
any insubordination by the staff will be dealt with after the meeting. The purpose of this discussion tonight and any public testimony is to consider a draft compatible new construction policy. The purpose of the policy is to guide the review of proposals for new construction when design is intentionally contemporary in style. Can't hear?
You say 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. I'll try to be loud. There are two times when this policy would be used by the staff and the board. One is when there is new construction in local historic districts, and the other when a proposed design is in a preservation review district or in a National Register district where a demolition is being reviewed. This policy would not be used for Section 106 review where federal funds are expended, because Section 106 review trumps this policy as do the specific standards of any local historic district, since the board can't create a policy that nullifies an ordinance. Although most every historic district ordinance in the city speaks to the desire for contemporary design, the specific standards often leave little room for this and rely heavily on replicating the building typologies found in our various city neighborhoods. Yet, in recent years, there have been many proposals in our historic districts that have a distinctly contemporary design aspect to them that can be difficult to square with the existing historic district standards. In 2016, my predecessor, Betsy, presented a draft policy document to this board that would clarify the design review process for construction of buildings with a contemporary design in local historic districts. This policy was not voted on by the board. Upon becoming the director, I took time to experience the design review process before coming forward with any follow-up policy, which I'm doing tonight. In the summer of 2017, I convened a meeting of neighborhood representatives, architects from the community, a representative from the building division, and also from the Landmarks Association. And we engaged in an activity to look at contemporary projects in other cities. I felt like that by removing local projects here in St. Louis, we might get a more honest discussion of the actual proposals themselves. And participants were asked to evaluate the degree to which the proposals were contemporary, how they were contemporary, and whether they were successfully executed. So I'd like to talk about that for a moment. Here's the list of folks who at various points have participated in this process. It's a mixture of board, aldermen, architects, developers, neighborhood representatives, and others I mentioned.
Is Rocco on our board now?
Rocco's not on our board, but he's on the board of the McKinley Heights Association.
Heck.
Was he in the wrong category?
He's in 2 categories.
Didn't mean to do that. He is. Rocco is not on our board now.
Okay. Make sure he knows that.
I will be sure to tell him. I was hoping he'd come tonight, but he's not here. So the first, I wanted to give the board a flavor for the projects that folks looked at in this exercise. So this is a project in Minneapolis in the Warehouse Historic District. 95% of folks who participated thought it was successfully designed. It was considered one of the less differentiated designs, although the design of the upper floors of the building is a metal panel system to go along with the stone and brick industrial warehouse buildings that surround it. And more than 90% of the folks there thought this was successfully executed in terms of the new material. The next project is a commercial building at 716 East Main Street in Louisville, Kentucky, in the Nulu Review Overlay District. Again, 95% of folks thought this was successfully executed. The most differentiated aspect was transparency. It's a little hard to tell with the lighting, although over there it's easier to tell that you have 2 stories of glass that are, significantly different in the way they are treated as opposed to the historic buildings that surround it. Another successful project was this at Penn Avenue in Pittsburgh. The building in question is the one kind of directly in the middle. It has a mesh metal panel system on top of the wall of the building behind it. So this was considered, again, a more compatible design, although I thought the material was quite unusual. And it was, the use of the metal here is something that a historic district ordinance in St. Louis would not typically support the use of, but, thank you, Andy. But I thought it was a very interesting design, and I think the folks did too. This is a project in the Over the Rhine Historic District in Cincinnati, Ohio. Now this is a block that didn't have a lot of historic context, but had some. You can see in the foreground here is one of the historic buildings, as is a building down the street over there. So this building is a primarily brick building, so the material relates well to the surrounding structures. However, the treatment of the windows is quite different and themselves, and as is the fenestration. Again, this was thought to be a successfully executed project. And this is the last project that garnered more than 50% of the folks saying they thought it was successfully executed. It only had 55%. This is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You can see it has this paneling system here on the corner and a very unusual fenestration pattern of windows. And the most differentiated aspect, there were a lot of differentiated aspects here: materials, fenestration, transparency, and color. So those were the projects that were deemed successfully executed that we looked at.
Dan?
Yes?
So
Oh, there's one more, actually.
what is the percentage that you think would constitute enough support for a project being considered successful? Is it just more than 50, or is it, almost 100, or what?
I think I don't have an exact number. I think the 55% one has enough problems with it, quite honestly, that I'm not surprised that there was a lot of folks. There was a significant minority who thought it wasn't successfully executed. I would say at least 75% plus would be needed. Not everyone here agrees on all the projects we review, so I wouldn't expect unanimity to be required. But by the same token, we do want to get a substantial percentage.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And then I forgot that this project was here. This is a project in Washington, D.C. in the Shaw Historic District. You can see it's got a lot of glass on the front of it, and it's got a lot of metal surrounding that glass. It is on an alley, so the alley is a brick facade. But again, the treatment of the windows, the tall windows, is different. But folks generally felt that this project related enough to the surrounding buildings going down the street, but was differentiated enough to be contemporary in design. And now, for the ones that did not garner more than half, this one is in Nashville, Tennessee, in the Germantown district. I think folks found the mixing of materials on the front of this problematic. I think that was the biggest problem with it. This is a project in Pittsburgh that was very unpopular. None of the participants thought this was successfully executed. You can see the historic buildings on the left, and then you've got the new structure on the right. They had vertical plane breaks, I think, to try to mimic the massing of the building going down the block. But at the end of the day, felt like there wasn't enough relationship between the original buildings and the contemporary buildings. This was also one, well, I guess this one was 50% successfully executed, but at the end of the day, the combination, I think, of the color and the brick here left a little to be desired in terms of the relationship of the buildings. So some conclusions that I drew from this were that where there is a uniformity of mass and scale, that the projects should relate to one another, the new projects and the old buildings. That a new material color can be introduced successfully, but when both color and material are unrelated to context, there is a lack of compatibility. And that the fenestration and the ratio of solid to void can successfully deviate from the context and still have an appropriate and successful project. And finally, having too many materials on a new project inhibits compatibility to the historic district. So that concludes really the visuals here. What I'd like to do at this point is go through the document briefly and just explain sort of the various components of it. Folks should have gotten that with their packets. The document includes an introduction section where I highlighted the kind of dual language in the ordinances, speaking towards a general desire for contemporary design, but also talking about wanting there to be compatibility with the historic context. Next is a purpose statement or purpose paragraphs, just basically delineating that we're seeking a balance here between appropriate historic design but contemporary design that enlivens our historic districts and differentiates contemporary buildings from the historic context, but in an appropriate way. And then we get to the two main sections of the document that talk to the meat of the matter, I suppose. The first is process. As I said earlier in the presentation, most of our historic districts are designed with standards to promote compatibility. So if you did everything in the standards, you would end up with a very similar building to the historic structures. The materials would be about the same, the window arrangement would be about the same, the percentage of solid to void would be about the same, et cetera. So then the question becomes, where does that contemporary aspect come into? If you follow all the rules, you end up with a very contextual building. And that's where I think we've lately begun to see more contemporary designs in the districts, even if the standards, if followed to the exact letter of the law, lead to a very compatible design. So, so in process, what I've tried to do is delineate a distinction between small projects and large projects. One of the pieces of feedback we got from the meetings with the group was that sometimes the smallest projects get the most design attention, and then large projects kind of fly through the process, even though they have a much stronger visual impact on our historic districts than do small projects. So, so basically, what the process section does is takes what we have always done kind of informally and just put some formal architecture around it. In terms of if you have a small project, you need to submit basic drawings and identify what elements are differentiated or not. And then there needs to be a meeting with the staff and neighborhood representatives to review plans. And at that point on a small project, conceivably, the applicant could say, I want to go to the board. They don't have to do that, and sometimes it makes sense to have more meetings. But I felt like the policy should have a minimum meeting of 1 requirement for a small building. At the same time, a large project requires a minimum of 2 meetings, and it also defines what a large project is. And a large project is defined by a project that where the primary facade comprises 20% or more of the block. If it's a residential building, it has more than 6 units, or it's greater than 3 stories. If it meets any one of those criteria, it's considered a large project, and there have to be at least 2 meetings with staff in the neighborhood. One thing that has been a thought in this process is, does the neighborhood have to sign on to agree to it before it could come to the board? And even though I think that would be desirable, we can't do that. And we already created a preliminary review policy that says how a preliminary review works. And this policy needs to work with our preliminary review policy. So I think our goal as a staff, my goal would be to get a consensus on projects if we can. But if we can't, at least there's a greater familiarity with the project if it comes to the board. So there's the meeting set up, and then at that point it comes to the board for consideration. And once you're at the board for consideration, you're under the preliminary review process, and we already have steps for that designed. So the final section in the document is the rules section. And the rules section breaks down into 2 parts: required compatibility and allowed differentiation. I'm not going to go through all these, but basically the spirit of it is you have to get the box right in terms of required compatibility. So massing and scale, height, setback, those sorts of things. One takeaway I had from that meeting that I referenced earlier was that where there was, a big departure from those basic design elements in the historic context, you got unsuccessful projects. So that seemed to be kind of a baseline, and that's what in the required compatibility section for the most part. And it also folds in some things like solar panels and mechanical units, et cetera. And for this section, frankly, I relied a fair amount on Betsy's draft document before. The other section is allowed differentiation. I think this is where we'll really get to the heart of the matter about whether it's a successful contemporary design or not. Basically, what the document says is that between the elements of material, color, fenestration, percentage of solid to void, and openings, an applicant can particularly pick 2 of those items to give a particularly contemporary design to, and be differentiated from the historic context. The rest, they have to be compatible. And the goal there is to get a balance. So there are details in there. Now, I do want to speak to one particular item. In the draft we have now, I have EFIS as a disallowed material. I know this was a conversation at the last board meeting when this was brought forward, which I listened to this week. And having had some more conversations with some architects in the office, I think we can delineate some construction methods that would allow EFIS to be a contemporary material, allowed material, and just because EFIS is used so often in suburban strip mall contexts, maybe it's gotten a bad name it doesn't deserve. Would you agree with that, Anthony?
I would.
I thought you might.
There are a couple of EFIS in our historic districts.
Right.
We don't want to stop doing that.
No, I agree. I don't think so.
They don't look suburban. I don't believe.
I don't believe so either.
Okay.
So just in conclusion, what I wanted to say is that our design review is really more of an art than a science, I think. You can create a fantastic set of standards. People can meet every standard, and you can end up with a really uninspiring building. On the other hand, if you have a really brilliant designer, you can ignore every standard and come up with something really innovative and exciting. But that's not really the way this process works. So I think the goal here is to create the parameters to engage in contemporary design in a careful and thoughtful way, but to make sure that we're maintaining the historical character and the thing that makes our historic districts unique, which is the historic buildings, while allowing our contemporary buildings to have more maybe design character than the standards have traditionally allowed. The fact is we have 17 historic districts, and it's impossible to write a standard like this and take into account every single item in each historic district ordinance. So when someone comes forth, we'll have to review these versus those standards, and some standards are more flexible and some aren't. And so tonight I present this really for question and answer or for public testimony and consideration, with the thought to come back either at next month's meeting or maybe in the September meeting for final approval. And that concludes my talk. Are there questions? I'll ask that since Richard's not here to say that.
Yeah, Chairman Callow had to step away, so I guess questions from the board. Commissioner Robinson?
So you touched on it, and I have not had the opportunity to read this, but two items that were that could be. How did you? And this was in the required compatibility. There were essentially two things that the designer could take
In the allowed differentiation, there are
in
two
the
items.
allowed. Explain that.
So the first set, the required compatibility, basically says that the massing and the setback and general aspects of facade composition, et cetera, need to relate to the surrounding buildings. But in the allowed differentiation, the designer / applicant can identify two elements where they're intentionally differentiating from the historic context. So like in the examples we just saw, there was the project in Washington where the windows clearly were different in proportion and design from the historic context. Or the windows, for example, in that project in Louisville, the materials on the project in Minneapolis. So you can pick a couple of elements where you're intentionally differentiating.
Okay.
But most elements need to relate so that we end up with a building that speaks both to compatibility and has a design that is distinctive and interesting in a contemporary context.
Unless I'm missing something, I just have a question about, basically these new guidelines loosen, well, they may encourage more contemporary materials and design, but they don't necessarily discourage like faux historic, do they?
Well,
So if someone wanted to come in Lafayette Square and they wanted to just mimic, you know, what you see in the Gate District, you know, could,
each district has historic district standards. And if you comply with all the standards, two thoughts. One is, there's no reason to go through this process if you comply with every standard, because, you know, a community can come here and say, we don't like the design, but if the staff gets up and says, this design meets every aspect of the code, there's nothing here that's outside of the code, it's all in compliance, which actually did happen a few months ago with a building. I know there was a building in Lafayette Square, the neighborhood, for a reason that didn't have to do with the design, wasn't happy with it, but the developer came in and met all the standards, and the representative from Lafayette Square got up and said, well, I'm not thrilled about something about this, but I can't complain about the design, so we have no objection. So I think that if an applicant comes in and just says, I'm going to comply, they can be courtesy meetings with the staff and with the neighborhood, but they don't need to go through this process. they go through this process if they've decided to differentiate. Now, I will say, it seems like, just from my own sort of informal thinking about the projects we've seen, I think more projects we're seeing these days have something differentiated in that design that would probably lead the developer to say, I'll go through the differentiated design process as opposed to just complying with the whole code and here we are.
Thanks.
So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
So I had a question, just to follow up on that. So again, this policy can't override or trump the historic district standards, because this is just a policy of the board, right?
Right, and that's a law passed by the Board of Aldermen, and signed by the mayor.
So like, again, the question I would just have, so like on EFS, if, let's pick on Lafayette Square, if it says no EFS in their historic district standards, then there's no
Then
EFS.
even if the policy contemplates EVIS being allowed, you couldn't do that.
Got it, okay.
My read of it. I mean, the other thing that could be beneficial about this, and there is a neighborhood now that's contemplating becoming a local historic district that now has this document, is as neighborhoods amend their ordinances and their standards or become new historic districts, they can have this policy in hand as they come in as kind of a way to look at how they do their standards. And I think it could be thought-provoking in terms of what materials they would allow, as opposed to just picking up another neighborhood standards, which they often do when they create a new ordinance. They just kind of look through the regular ordinances that have already been created, and they see something that says, you have to replicate what's on the block. Okay, we'll replicate what's on the block. Seems reasonable. This, I'm hoping, will lead to some more thought about how that could be done in a way that encourages some contemporary design along with the historical contextuality.
And that goes to the process you said, so I'd written down there's 17 historic districts. Have you shared this with this document with the various historic districts?
A copy has been sent to a representative involved in virtually every historic district. Some of our historic districts are very active, and some are barely active at all from the community level. So, naturally the ones that are more active are easier to engage. But an effort has been made to reach out to all of them, yes.
And have you gotten feedback then?
Most of the neighborhood representatives came to the 2 meetings we've had, and I have solicited, there was verbal feedback, I've solicited written feedback and not gotten much, quite honestly. Not gotten any written feedback, although I think Alex Sharp, I don't know if Alex is going to speak tonight, from the Home Builders is here. So.
Because I guess from a process standpoint, I'd feel better if there was like, we know that the 17 historic districts all got it, maybe that this document's on the website so that people could have an opportunity to vet it and review it and provide comment on it before we take action on it. So I guess my thought was it'd be maybe the September meeting as opposed to the August meeting, but that's just me.
It is on the website, and we can go back and solicit more comment after tonight as well. But tonight's meeting was purely for discussion with
Sure.
purposes, so I had no intention of it being on the agenda for approval tonight.
Right. Do we want to, is there comment from the public? Do we have a sign-up sheet for this, or?
We do. I don't know if anyone signed up or not.
I did sign up, but I signed up just in case I wanted to say something, and I don't.
Okay. Anybody else?
No.
Yeah. He was the only one who signed up, so. Oh,
I'll make a couple comments if you want.
it's a public hearing. You're welcome to.
Did I go up here?
Yes.
Okay. 11th Street.
Thank you.
And I have lived in Soulard for 35 years, have renovated a couple of my own homes, and I have been on the Code and Zoning Committee for a number of years down in Soulard for the neighborhood organization. And I'm very familiar with the historic aspects of our buildings. And I understand the need to have new construction in our neighborhoods. And there have been some very nice examples throughout the city of some new construction. In our neighborhood, we basically require people to follow what has been built. They should have a model example of a building that is built in Soulard. And I know I personally, and a couple of people I've talked to, think that very modern construction is inappropriate for Soulard. That's just our opinion. I think it's beautiful in other neighborhoods. There's some wonderful new construction on Lafayette Avenue, west of Jefferson Avenue. Very, very nice, very contemporary, very nice. But I would not want to see it in my neighborhood. Other neighborhoods may feel different. Thank you.
So Dan, on that comment, so again, if you were in a district that required a historic model example for new construction, that would still be a requirement, right?
Right. So again, this is where we're talking as much art as science. So, for example, I will say that in Lafayette Square, there is not a word about contemporary architecture to be found anywhere in their code, ever. And,
Lots of information about plagiarism, though.
okay. So in their case, I have to admit, it's tempting to say you can't use this in Lafayette Square. But at the end of the day, I think it's simpler to adopt the policy, and where you have very strict ordinance, for example, this can say we'd contemplate metal panels, or we'd contemplate EFIS, or we'd contemplate other contemporary design methods. But if the ordinance itself doesn't
So Design Professional City. I'm going to commend you on your work to date on this. I think it allows a lot more freedom, potentially in expression, while still maintaining historic standards. It's somewhat difficult to not just replicate based upon what many neighborhoods require, and sometimes that's not appropriate to this day and age. So I think, I'm not here to speak on this, but since I am here, I like what I heard today, because I think it allows all of us a little bit more differentiation in some of our neighborhoods that is still compatible. I appreciate that. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Okay, then turning to the preliminary reviews. First up is 4301.
I'm Jan Cameron from the Cultural Resources Office. Preliminary review application to construct a new building at 4301 Maryland Avenue in the Central West End. And this is the site. you see it's an unusual parcel, has a clipped corner. It's at the intersection of Maryland and Boyle Avenue. And that actually is a historic configuration, although it's a little bit more clipped than, but this is a 1909 Sanborn map showing the parcel. So, but the other, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. The other thing that impacts this is there is currently a cul-de-sac at Maryland that has taken some of the front yard of this property. So the proposal is for a 3-story condominium, I guess the condominium building? Apartment building. And I have to say that the developers of the building have been very patient. This has been a long process to try to get a design that the Cultural Resources could support, as well as the Central West End Association. So these are some perspective renderings to give you an idea of the design. What we're looking at on the left is the Maryland facade, and then the Boyle on the right. You can see that, again, there's a clipped corner that contains the main entry. Again, the Boyle from another view, and this would be the north side, which actually faces an alley. And then the rear facade, which is the west facade, and that is where the parking will be entered from. So one of the concerns, well, let me go ahead and do this first. These are the elevations, and on the right is the oblique corner that contains the main entry to the building. The Boyle elevation. And the north side. So here are the streetscapes. The building fits volumetrically appropriately. It is set considerably away from its nearest neighbor on the west. As you can see, that will be where the parking is, and the neighborhood and the Cultural Resources Office is concerned about properly screening that location with an appropriate fence or wall. This is a site plan submitted. I never get it to work right, but this is the proposed building. There may be a future building on the other half of the site, but right now what we're concerned about is this building right here. You can see this is a little parking area, and the drive enters from the alley from the north. And the site, looking at it from Boyle. And some of the context. This is Maryland. And this is the opposite on Boyle. Primarily a commercial street. I have a letter from Alderman Navarro in support of the project with the requirements that the Central West End Association mentions in the letter that I'm also submitting, which is that the historic windows be used on street elevations, that the roof material be an appropriate architectural shingle, and that the color palette be reconsidered to be slightly less dark. So the staff is recommending approval with those requirements, as well as the screening of the parking area. Otherwise, we're recommending that a preliminary approval be granted, subject to staff review of the final drawings.
Okay, questions for staff?
Jan, what's the distance between the new building and the existing building to the west?
It's considerable, maybe the 20 feet?
I think it's 20 because the other building is right up on top.
I should have mentioned that sided elevation will be cementitious siding that can be painted.
Any other questions?
One more. Is the roof line, can you go back to the rendering with the Maryland facing elevation?
Sorry.
That one. Yeah, just like that roof line, the pitched roof, that's compliant? I don't know, I guess that is compliant? It
Yeah,
just
it's
seems a
fine.
little,
And the gables will be covered with a composite shingle that looks like slate. So, I mean, that exists in many buildings in the city, and then in sort of West End.
you answer.
The question I had for you is, so we've looked at this over a year ago, and we did approve something, right?
We approved a larger building. They've come back with a more reduced, well, actually, I guess it's going to be 2 buildings now, but this is the first one.
So to put you on the spot, Jan, do you like this one better than that one?
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
What were the stipulations that staff was requiring? I want to make sure I recorded them. Or that you're seeking.
Well, we were seeking the historic windows to be used, as per the suggestion of the Center West End. That the color scheme be reconsidered to maybe add some more limestone colored, which would be more appropriate for the neighborhood. And then to screen the parking on the west side of the building with a wall or a fence.
And you mentioned stipulations that the neighborhood was seeking. Do those encompass those?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, do we have the applicant?
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Antone, the architect, and I'm really here to just answer any other questions that you might have, or I could further describe the design concept if you wish.
Can
But
we get your address?
12 Blackpool.
Thank you. Any questions for him? Anthony? I got one in the meantime. I'm sorry. So what I should ask, are you good with those additional conditions of using historic windows?
We
having
are,
a limestone
yeah.
color?
We've
and
discussed
screening
this
the
with
park-
the Central West End P&D committee, and we're all good with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So well, okay. So the 20-foot setback between the buildings, so I guess I understand a design point why that's there, but my question would be why not another concept that would make this building fit contextually on the site as other buildings in the neighborhood?
Would your thought be to have the Maryland elevation pretty much cover the whole width of the lot? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay. The building does have a basement, or a main level garage, so we do need the turnaround space there for the driveway, of course, yeah.
So without redesigning this, I am envisioning something that is essentially the width of the lot minus the setbacks that are required, and some bump out that allows you to still come in from the rear into the building, I guess, is
Where the building would be built over the portion of the driveway, is that?
Correct.
Yeah. We did not explore that. We do have a landscape area in front of the driveway, of course. We have a wrought iron fence between the building and the building to the west, and that'll be landscaped.
Could you do a brick wall, just a wing wall that
We had actually thought of that, and actually it was going to be, it would have encroached into that front of the building, and I know we didn't like that. I thought that would have been an opportunity to sort of separate that. The building to the west does have, it's really two buildings with an archway between it, if you noticed in the context drawings. Yeah.
I live a block away, I'm familiar.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I mean, there could be sort of a facade that would continue across the front. But it wouldn't really want to be a 4-story or 3-story wall. We had originally thought that it could be like a screen wall, really, to cover the driveway, and it would be in front of it and just be a screen in front of it, like a 1-story brick wall or something, was the only other thought we had given that.
Yeah, I was thinking more like the actual building and a configuration such that it achieved both what you're looking for with coming in off of the alley and having an urban form, which I think a 20-foot separation between the two buildings doesn't give, or does not lend to being very urban. And while I know that there are buildings to the west on Maryland that definitely are not that, I think those were done prior to the historic district standard. And so today, I think urbanism is quite important in our designs.
Tony, I will point out that they are pretty much in line with the building line of the street. Here. And that these are really an anomaly, because there's what's left over from the original development on the site.
Right.
So you'll never see this new building in context right directly with this one. It's back here.
No. I wasn't actually talking about the setback off of Maryland. That I understand. I'm talking about the setback between the building and the building west of it, that 20-foot. So, looking at the site plan, I am referring to this space here.
And again, I didn't see the letters, but were there support letters from the alderwoman and the neighborhood on this then?
Yes.
Okay. Any further questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. Was there anybody else signed up to speak on this one? I don't think so.
We're not signed up to speak, but we can kind of explain that. So, in terms of, so we had to build something that economically made sense.
Sorry, and your
and
name,
the
sorry,
multi-
your name and your address?
My name's Lauren Matheson. I live at 1203 St. Charles.
Thank you.
Economically, we had to build something that made sense, and we're on a weird lot. We could have, if we had put the driveway off the back, it would have taken up the entire, and from the Boyle elevation, you would have been looking at a driveway.
So there's another way to achieve that. I hear what you're saying, and I heard what your
Yeah.
architect said, but I'm saying no. There's definitely a way to have designed
Dad,
this.
can you, okay, Dad, can you better explain? He's better under pressure.
Sure.
Hi, my name's Mark Mathis, and I live at 4300 McPherson, just a block away there. It is an odd-shaped lot, and how it comes to a point in the front there. We had a difficulty with extending a building any farther towards Maryland, just in thought process was, to have a nice green area in front might be nice. And from the west side, people that occupy that building, a lot of times people would prefer, distance between the building next door. So that's really all I have to say. And then our thought process was, in order to get the parking, on the first level, that we had to move from the alley back. And I don't think it would have looked right if we'd have had more of a pointy out on that Maryland side. You know what I'm saying? We would have had to have taken that building and eliminate the driveway, and then bring it up, and we'd still have sort of like a point to the building. I don't know, it just didn't seem like it was going to work.
Yeah, so that's not exactly what I was saying. So
You're referring to the distance between the building to the west and the back of our building?
referring to this distance and
Right.
not your setback here, because I understand because of this corner here why the building is set back here. So that I get. What I'm saying is here, along here, why your building couldn't have done something like this and you still had a driveway that then allowed you to come.
There's a minimum parking requirement also for a fourth.
I understand, but none of what's being stated is, what I'm stating does not change any of your requirements, is what I'm saying. This is strictly a design problem. Does not change parking spaces that you have, or that you have a 4-unit building. That doesn't, I'm simply saying that you've got roughly 20 feet here, and from an urban context, if you take a look at the distance between these two buildings here, in my house, and those two buildings there with a newer house, or that building there and that building there, what you don't see there is 20 foot of space.
What about a few houses over?
To the left, it looks like there's a space between the buildings there.
So there is a vacant lot there that doesn't exist now because there is a new house that's been built in there. In that space, and you have the same sort of setbacks that you see here, and there.
Anthony, the only thing I can say is that we never thought of it that way. Just didn't enter into the process of what we were trying to do, so. Anyway.
I think we've heard, I think we're ready for, so do we have a motion on this one, Commissioner Vines?
I move that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval to the proposal, subject to review of the final documents, design details, and materials by the Cultural Resources Office.
Does that include the stipulations or specifically exclude the stipulations?
Yeah, could I amend your motion or add to it that they use historic windows, that the color scheme be changed to add more limestone color, and that there be screening with respect to that west side?
I grant you permission to amend my motion.
Then I second that motion. Okay, any further discussion? Commissioner Vines?
Aye.
Alderman Kennedy?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Abstain.
Commissioner Richardson? Aye. And Chairman Keller, you're going to vote on this one, or no?
Aye.
Aye, okay. That is 4 ayes and 1 abstention. The ayes have it. Can I turn it back over to you, Chairman?
Thank you, Commissioner. Agenda item B, 5612 to 24 Waterman. Thank you, sir.
another preliminary review application for a new building in the Central West End at 5612 to 24 Waterman Boulevard. Now, those of you with memories may remember that the board, almost exactly a year ago, approved a preliminary review for another building on this site by a different architect and a different developer. So this is an entirely different project. It is to construct 6 townhouses, attached townhouses. There they are. They will have underground basement parking. This is the proposal. It appears to generally comply with the historic district standards, but the staff is concerned about the amount of non-brick material on the front elevation. Now, I should say that we originally thought the white areas that you're looking at were lap siding. That has been changed to a cementitious panel. So, but it still seems to be a good deal of non-brick, which is not really characteristic of the buildings in the immediate vicinity. It's at the corner of Clara and Waterman. The elevation on the left is the Clara facade. The east facade will be relatively close to the adjacent property, which is probably a 1980s construction. That's the rear elevation. Now, this site is landlocked, so a new curb cut will be required, even though the standards don't allow it generally. So the street elevations. Ignore the amount of siding on the Clara elevation. That will be entirely brick, and it was changed at the request of the Cultural Resources Office. You can see the building in the lower elevation. The building to the left of the proposed building is the contemporary one that I was talking about. But the majority of buildings in the immediate vicinity around this building, as you'll see in a second, are historic and Kitty corner. That's the building to the left, the 1980s construction, which still has a significant amount of brick on its facade. It's adjacent to the south, adjacent to the west, and the opposite streetscape. The staff is recommending that the board grant preliminary review to the design with the stipulation that the amount of non-brick material in the front elevation be reconsidered. And of course, subject to review of final plans and materials by the Cultural Resources Office. I have a letter from the Central West End Association saying that they are generally in support of the project and agree with the staff recommendations. I have nothing from the alderman on this property.
Questions on this side?
You may have said it, but the recommendation has changed from when the agenda was printed?
Yes,
Okay.
Because I got very late revisions.
Questions on this side? Commissioners, do you want to hear from the applicant? Commissioner Kennedy, you have a motion? Evan?
I move that the Preservation Board, oh no, you made a change.
We're asking.
Sorry, was there anybody here to
Board
speak
of
against this
A.
project as changed?
You can use
Against?
A's language.
Is anybody in favor? Yes.
You can motion.
It is to accept.
The Preservation Board, give preliminary approval to the proposed new plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Is that with the siding changed to brick, is that,
Yes.
Yes.
You all don't want to stop us, do you? Okay.
Yeah, I just want to discuss the nature of the brick versus the stucco versus the lap siding.
Have you agreed to the changes?
We have presented them, thought we'd have an opportunity to sort of state our case at this meeting.
I mean, we're about to approve it with those on there. Do you want us to?
With stucco,
Yeah, with the
or changing the stucco to a brick?
brick.
I don't know, Jan testified that they had agreed to it, but it doesn't.
Can we discuss that?
Will you withdraw your motion?
Further discussion.
Okay, and withdraw the second agrees?
Sure.
Okay. I think they're snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
So again, my name is Paul Brendan, Principal Architect at DataWorks 3459 Arsenal. I guess the biggest, and this is all, again, late in the game that we found this out too, we were asked to change it from the siding to the stucco at some point a few weeks ago.
Well, just to clarify, our testimony is that you've agreed to change it. Is that true or not true?
From the lap siding to the stucco?
Jan?
That's my understanding, that you were willing to do the stucco.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is that what's being then recommended as per
Yes.
the drawings that are showing?
Stand by. Jan?
No, we were saying that we still thought that there was too
Good catch.
much non-brick on the front elevation. And that's not necessary that we wouldn't be able to accept some kind of stucco, or some amount of stucco, but it seemed to be that there was just not enough brick on the front.
Okay, proceed.
Okay, so in that, in that sort of regard and sort of based upon what we heard earlier about differentiation of material and having this be contextual, but yet sort of fit in with the immediate surroundings, we were looking for some sort of differentiation. And we believe that the stucco is an appropriate material to pull that off, and probably better than the lap siding as was suggested to us. So that's why we went this route, and in doing the calculations on the front facade, I think if we find from above the sort of foundation line up, we're more at like a 60-40 when you look at the flat elevation in proportion. So it's sort of, from our perspective, it does provide that differentiation for a number of contextual reasons. One, another for maybe a more contemporary or modern look for resale value, and trying not to replicate or imitate the buildings that are there, but provide a building that's appropriate for its time. And we feel like providing a different
You did sit through
material.
our earlier discussion.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree with that in holistic, not just for this project. I live in the city and have lived elsewhere, and I believe that there needs to be somewhat, just putting more brick on the building, in my mind, doesn't make it a better building. It might not make it more contextual either.
Did you bring other people with you who'd also like to speak?
I have the owners here, the potential developers, if they want to say anything in regards to the project, or Jan, you're more than welcome to.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Holak, 1021 Lafayette Avenue. My main question, I guess, would be if there is a motion to add more brick. Mr. Brennan spoke that we think the design stands as it is, but from a developer standpoint, I guess we would like to know, what is that percentage? We're at a 60-40 now. Is the recommendation to go to what level? Because that makes a difference on what we would be agreeing to in terms of the amended recommendation. So is there a...
I will try to trick you now.
Okay.
Up to what percentage would you agree?
I don't know the answer to that, and I only say that because,
Is 99 too much?
I think it would be not preferred.
85 too much?
I would answer it in the following and say, I think it depends on where do you stop, okay? So we've got some stucco, we've got brick, and what's the appropriate point to stop that brick? And I don't know the answer to that, without doing some more design work, so.
Let's see if we can find.
Okay.
What's the percentage, Jan?
Well, the standards say that all new building materials shall be the same as the dominant materials of adjacent buildings. Dominant materials of adjacent buildings is brick and terracotta, some limestone. I wasn't asking you to put limestone on the front of it, but it is not uncharacteristic of many buildings in the Central West End to have small areas of stucco, generally bay windows. And that, I think, is what we were looking for here, rather than having it an entire facade bay. So,
And these are projected bays, just I'm not sure if that reads that well on a two-dimensional drawing, but they're projected bays. I think we want to do what makes everybody happy. Obviously, there are financial considerations to your material selections. We're not asking for any subsidy, and we're trying to thread the needle of, can we make the project work in the market? There's a rising construction cost environment. It's a rising construction material environment thanks to some tariffs. We're happy to work with you guys. We don't have, we don't need to dictate terms necessarily. I guess I just want to understand from our perspective, where do we stop, and we'll live with that. We'll figure that out. If we can come to an agreement, we'll live with that and figure it out. So, with that being said, I don't know where to go from here. I guess I'm looking for some additional guidance.
Ms. French, you want to speak?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the applicant. What color do you envision the stucco being?
I think we'll want to stay in a field with the brick. The brick is intended to be red with gray elements, reddish gray. I don't think we're going to try and get super creative or super aggressive with it. So I'm thinking it's something in a field of gray, as yet to be determined, but in that field.
So, sounds to me like ostensibly it's not going to be like some glaring mismatch.
Not orange,
It's
it's
like
not.
something in Phoenix or something like that.
Correct. It's not intended to look southwestern or anything like that,
I can live with it. For sure. Thank you.
Any other questions?
So back to that percentage, Jan, and you don't necessarily, I'm looking at the design, and now that the developer has given more information, I'm now actually questioning this, because I guess when I looked at it, I actually saw this as being a contrasting material. But if the goal here is that this material be similar to the brick, then to me it's just reading as a less expensive material that's been put on to accommodate a budget, which I understand budget being important, but it just seems like if there is a material change, that material change probably wants to contrast what's happening versus sort of simulate what's happening.
And let me maybe expound a little bit more. I maybe didn't phrase it as well as I could have, as elegantly as I could have. It is intended to differentiate. It is intended to contrast the brick. I was answering Mr. Vine's question to say it's not intended to aggressively contrast it necessarily, but it is intended to be an element that contrasts. What we'd like this to read to a buyer is that you have your own townhome. You're not buying an apartment in a solid apartment building where it just reads as a full brick building. We want people to feel like there's some individuality to these units, particularly at the price point that we're going to be at. We don't want it to read just like one wall of solid color. My response about the color being in a field of gray, that's to be determined. We certainly are welcome to input on that as well. At this juncture, we would like it to be a contrasting, but yet still complementary material, but not necessarily a matching material, if that makes sense.
Sure, I'm just.
But you could use two colors of brick.
I'm sorry?
You could use two different colors of brick.
We could use
and
two colors, yeah.
achieve
I mean, that is
differentiation.
possible, yeah. I will say that there may be a price point at which that becomes too expensive to make the project feasible. We've interviewed 3 or 4 contractors, and feedback from every one of them was, the more brick you have on the building, the more expensive it is. And there is a reality to that. And I get that that's not necessarily a concern of this board, but there is a reality to that.
Well, the other thing I'll point out, if I can get this stupid thing to work, is a lot of those on the 3rd story are recessed balconies, and we're not asking brick there.
No, I actually
So,
completely
if you look at
understood
it,
that.
It's not that substantial amount of brick per unit. that we're asking for. This was also the desire of the Central West End Association, who was not able to appear tonight.
Commissioners, are we far enough along to know whether or not we want to vote on a preliminary approval subject to review of documents and design details and materials?
I'm comfortable making a motion.
Commissioner Richardson, are you comfortable yet?
I'm comfortable voting on his motion.
Yeah. Are you comfortable voting on a motion like that? Okay, Commissioner Vines, make your motion.
Move to grant preliminary approval
Read
to the
that.
proposal. Subject to review of the final documents, design details, and materials by the Cultural Resources Office.
I'll second for discussion. Commissioner Richardson?
Yeah, I think the applicant and staff can work out the appropriate amount of brick versus stucco. I think, yeah, certainly that recessed area could be stucco, and then I think staff working with applicant on the front part makes sense.
Commissioner Robinson?
Fair enough.
You are king of details today. Much appreciated, by the way.
I agree. I never had a concern with the stucco that was recessed. I understood that, and it was really about the elements that was happening at the front. And like I said, I mean, it could work. The only reason I brought it up was because staff brought it up and the Central West End Association brought it up.
Commissioner Vines, you seem to have enough votes to pass your motion. Do you want to talk and try to change that?
I would
Okay,
like
then.
to vote on that.
Okay, then. The motion on the floor is to approve with the usual conditions. Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Kennedy, yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Vines, yes or no?
Yes.
That's 4 yeses, and the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, thank you very much. Pardon my interruption before. We now reconvene to hear appeals. Quorum is still present. We'll do agenda item C, 1017, Guyer.
Chairman, my understanding is that the Guyer people are not here.
Not coming ever.
I heard nothing from them. Ms. Barkey told me that she had been in touch with them, and they said they weren't going to be here tonight.
Okay, well, I know that we have reviewed this carefully. Please introduce your comments for the record.
Sorry. This is an interesting project. Those of you that have been on the board for a while will possibly remember that in 2012, this house, go to what it looked like in 2012, on Guyer Street in the Soulard Historic District. What this is it was a story-and-a-half house, 2-story-and-a-half alley houses, so to speak, rear houses, with 2 rooms that had been added at various times to the front to bring it up both to the building line. So the proposal that we saw in 2012 was to rehabilitate them as a mini-mart. That didn't go very well. So the proposal tonight was to build a new house behind it. This is what it currently looks like behind the wall right now. Initial demolition was begun. There was a collapse. Essentially, all of the historic houses have been removed, and the only thing left is the front wall. The proposal now, as I said, is to do a single-family house. The front wall will be restored and using historic windows and doors. The house behind it will have a steeply pitched roof to allow a second story to make it large enough to accommodate the usual number of bedrooms and baths. I have letters approving this proposal from the Central West, I'm sorry, the Soulard Restoration Group. And the staff has already also worked with the applicant to reduce the slope of the roof and make it a little bit more compatible with the surrounding buildings, which are also very old. The building is in the center of this shot. The building to the left is a Fachwerk house from about 1850, and the building to the right is from about 1875. So that's that. The context, so it's in the very early part of Soulard. Again. So the proposal was that the denial, which was in fact an administrative denial because of time constraints under the ordinance, that the board overturn it and approve the plans as submitted.
She's still seeking these stipulations.
And for the record, you're asking us,
For the record, I'm Jan Cameron from the Cultural Resources Office. I promise to tell the truth, and I am submitting the ordinances.
and is the recommendation that you're making,
To approve, subject to final review plans and materials by the staff. Do I need to state the ordinance numbers?
do you need, yes, please.
Yes, please, thank you.
Okay. Hang on, I'm getting my glasses.
Yes.
And 64689, amended by 64925, our enabling legislation, and 57078, the Soulard Historic District Ordinance, amended by 62382, the new Soulard Standards.
May I ask, on your recommendation, you ask for a stipulation that alterations to the front walls comply with the standards and the slope of the roof be revised to lessen its visibility from the street? Is that still?
What you see in your agenda is the revisions that we asked for.
Okay, so that's still, you have not changed that?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, is anybody here representing the appellant? Okay, thank you. Commissioners, that concludes our hearing on this matter. Commissioner Richardson, have you got a motion to make down there?
The Preservation Board overturned the Director's administrative denial and approved the proposed plans with the requirement that alterations to the front walls comply with the Soulard standards and that the slope of the roof be revised to lessen its visibility from the street.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Commissioner Vines, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Kennedy, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
That is 4 yeses to overturn the director's administrative denial. Thank you, commissioners. Next up, agenda item D, 2254 to 56 South Grand.
And I'm Jan Cameron, and I promise to tell the truth. I am entering into the record PowerPoint presentation, the agenda, ordinance 64689, amended by 64925, and ordinance 57702, the Compton Hill Historic District Ordinance. The proposal, this is the Pelican Building, almost finished, being restored. And the proposal is to erect 3 wall signs for the Domino's Pizza that's going to occupy the first story. Okay. So, this is the site. Now you will note with the 2 colors that the green is the Compton Hill Historic District, the purple is the Shaw Historic District. Buildings face one another, their sign standards are entirely different. This is the proposal for this grand elevation. There will be a projecting Domino's sign over the corner entry, and then the Domino's with a little domino over the shop windows. And you can see that this was originally, you will remember, covered with permastone. So there has been some brick damage. These signs will not damage any historic brick. Okay. And on the elevation for the south facade, which faces Shenandoah, there will be another small wall sign, another domino. Now, the central, I'm saying that, the Compton Hill Historic District standards do not allow interior or backlit signs, and these are all backlit signs. Oh, that's the location of the small domino on the Shenandoah facade. Context, that's the new apartment building under construction that you'll all remember. This is the conservatory to the south. This is the opposite streetscape on South Grand. Now, I will note that we have received a sign application for that building with the buff brick front. That is in the Shaw District. The sign is backlit, and that is acceptable under the Shaw standards. It'll be directly opposite. I have a letter from the Compton Hill neighborhood in support of the proposal. From Bill Brush, the president of the neighborhood. Nevertheless, because of the standards, the staff is recommending denial and that the signs be exterior lit.
So, I see two issues. One is the nature of the signs themselves, and the second is the fact that they're backlit. Do you have opinions on the first part? Are all the signs equally reprehensible?
Would you like to? I don't think that they comply with the other standard that's in the Compton Hill ordinance says that should be compatible with the architectural character of the building. On the other hand, this is an extremely unusual architectural character. The signs are not a permanent alteration to the building. As far as I'm willing to go.
I see two, do I see two signs in that rendering?
Yeah, there's the wall sign and then there's a projecting sign that will be mounted over the corner entry.
Was there a third sign that was?
And there was a third sign around the corner on the Shenandoah elevation, that little guy.
And that's the spare domino?
Yes.
Could I, in conscience, like two of those and wonder what the hell the third domino's doing there? Okay. Questions for Jan on this side?
Does neon count as backlit? Because I'm just looking at the original Pelican restaurant sign, and that was a
It
big
certainly
lavish.
was, right. This is the Compton Hills, and I should have mentioned, I guess, that this is also a city landmark. There are no standards other than our usual adoption of Secretary of the Interior standards for this landmark. There's no official standards for it. The comments were made under the purview of the Compton Hill Historic District. So I would say neon would not be backlit. It's interior illumination that was found offensive. But then on the other hand, the neighborhood group has indicated their support.
I would just, thinking out loud, I was just, if the owner wanted to refurbish and reinstall the original sign that was there before the storm, I guess, what was it, 10 years ago, that knocked it down, would that not be in compliance, even though it was there?
No, it would be, because it's mentioned in the landmark ordinance, but I don't know that that sign exists anymore.
Okay, just, thank you.
Questions on this side? Okay, thank you. Okay, let's hear from the appellant.
We're last, I guess, the last one's here, but my name's Gary Bajowski. I live at 1866 Summit View, St. Charles, Missouri. And we ended up...
Will your testimony be the truth?
Yes.
Did you bring pizza?
We can, if it passes. No.
Just asking.
We definitely
I'm
can
not
do
going to tell you how to make your case.
So we are excited about this building. That, you know, I know it's an historic site, and if you go back to the pictures, I think it states what we've done to the building to bring it back to life. We're pretty excited about it. We ended up starting this process about a year ago, working with the Compton Heights. We ended up showing them drawings, and in their district, there is there is no drawings there, but I had a couple pictures that they approved at the Starbucks to have backlit signs. So that was kind of the precedence that we went to them for, because that Starbucks is in that historic district with backlit signs. And of course, we want this building to be, you know, very classy. So what we did is we went back to work, and if you notice the size of the signs, like it's only a 1 foot by 1 foot 11 inches. It's a very small signs. And same way with the Domino's sign, it's only 14 inches tall. So our traditional Domino's stores, we go with 25-inch letters, and we try to do the biggest sign possible. So we went back to the Compton Heights with the smaller signage, and we thought it was done appropriately, but of course we are trying to keep, besides the historic value, is that we're also dealing with the brand image of Domino's Pizza. So we just wanted to tie some of that together and make it look nice. And we felt we've kind of tied everything back together with the building, so it really looks nice. And that's kind of where we came up with these smaller designs, if that helps.
And I'm Mark Ratterman. I'm the owner of the building and the franchisee for Domino's. I live at number 1 Trails End Lane here in St. Louis. And like Gary said...
Your testimony will also be the truth?
Yes, yes. We're really proud of this project. Our existing store is right down the street at the corner of Grand and Arsenal, and we're in an old building there. It's probably a historic building as well, and it has a backlit sign on it right now. And like Gary said, the Starbucks right up the street has their backlit signs, and you know, we really didn't cut any corners when we rehabbed this building. We put a brand new slate roof on it. We have historic windows. We have not cut any corners because we wanted to be proud of it, and we want the building to look great 30 years from now.
Cutting corners is the other pizza people, isn't it?
Right. So we're really, you know, when you spend that kind of money on a building like this, we want the signs to look good too. You know, because we care about the neighborhood and the building, and because we're in this for the long haul. So we think it looks tasteful. We think this is going to be the nicest Domino's store in the Midwest. That people are going to come here to look at this. We haven't seen any other stores in the country that are going to look like this, and we're really excited about it. So.
Question, commissioners on this side? Questions, commissioners on this side? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One more thing.
Yes, sir.
I know you mentioned you like 2 of the 3. If that's an option too, we might consider taking off a sign. So if that would make it pass.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Robinson? I would normally, because this is a sign, send it to Commissioner Colleen, who has plagued us with signs in the past, but he is not here. You've not really gotten your way tonight.
Right.
So I'm going to let you make this motion on these Domino's signs, which, I mean, are making me hungry.
Me too. And they didn't bring pizza.
They know better. There'll have to be a second Domino's store.
20 minutes.
I'm really okay with the third domino. It's quirky.
So, yeah, I was looking at the third domino, and I was...
We're just the 2. I'd be hugely enthusiastic, but I could be a little...
Can I see the other one?
Sure.
Cork's not bad.
Sorry. Thought that was off. Okay, so,
See it?
yes. How does that work on downspout? There's a downspout there.
Yes, there is. It projects out, I think.
Hmm.
Is that correct?
The downspout was actually moved over, so it
Okay.
doesn't affect the downspout anymore.
Okay.
Still your motion.
I move that the Preservation Board hold that thought. Jan? Backlit sign on Starbucks.
In the district? I don't know.
So it's the next block down, but,
Maybe, I went to the board,
But
Oh.
there was a demolition involved.
yeah. Yeah, see, I'm not sure that was
See, I don't think that's in the Compton Hill district. It's in the.
It's not,
town.
yeah, it's not,
outside of it.
because it's Sydney and Grand, so
The
it's,
board saw it because of the demolition of the gas station behind.
gotcha.
I would say while you're thinking, this is a gorgeous rehab,
Mm-hmm.
and I never go looking for pizza in the daytime.
Mm-hmm.
Nighttime, it'd be nice to know where it was.
It's going in the Pelican building.
With lights, with a lighted sign. But it's your motion.
I move that the Preservation Board overturn the director's denial and allow backlit sign as proposed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Actually, can we go back to photos, Jan?
That, wait.
Yeah. Okay, so, actually, I'd like to amend that motion.
Mr. Vine's approval?
Well,
He'll want to hear the,
Yeah.
what if
Amendment
I say
first.
no, you can't? I'm just kidding.
I think he's kidding.
Oh, okay. All right. I move that the Preservation Board overturn the director's denial and allow for the main sign on the grand side and the corner sign as proposed.
He has to approve the amendment.
I see no, I don't have a personal issue with any of the signs as proposed, so
Then you-
I would not second that motion. I would only second if,
Okay, is there a second for the motion?
Second.
Okay, motion's made and
Well,
seconded.
can,
If he amends it, doesn't the second have to agree?
No, he withdrew his second, and we have a new second.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay, so,
Discussion.
all right, so I actually have no issues with all three signs, but my motion to overturn was based on the fact that in two of the locations that signs are going, there is no historic brick. the third location does have historic brick, and we would be mounting some sort of sign that will come off of the wall. And so that's why I made that change.
Discussion on this side?
My rationale behind it is that if, and I realize that historic district standards are written in a way, and that's fine, but if there's an opportunity to grant some kind of a variance on this, if you look at historic photos of the city, there were many lavish, bright, illuminated signs all over the place on buildings that are historic. And it led to a much more vibrant streetscape, I think, and I think this city in particular is far too conservative when it comes to sign ordinances. And what we do is we'll discourage illuminated signs, and then we wind up with like a flat vinyl piece of, like a banner almost, with just really cheap-looking letters that happen to comply, that just do not look worthy of being adorned on such a great building. And while, Domino's is Domino's, and it may not be here years to come, and I think these, nice are the sign.
Based on what market analysis?
Well, I don't
is
know,
that?
just so, who knows? The building should be standing long into the future, and it may outlive that Domino's, and I think that
It
whatever.
outlived Pelican.
Yeah, it did outlive Pelican. I would love to see that sign refurbished too, but it's gone. But anyway, I feel like this city could use a little more vibrancy in terms of signage, and there's a business with no sign is a sign of no business. And I would like to see a streetscape illuminated at night so that people can tell what businesses are open and where.
Want to make these bigger?
No, I'm okay with the size.
Okay.
I just don't have any objection with the
backlit.
functionality or the backlit design or anything like that.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yeah, and I think I would agree with Commissioner Vines. I think the Compton Hill Historic District standards, they have this prohibition on signs because most of the district is not commercial, it's residential, and so they're making sure that there's not going to be signage on residential properties. And so this is kind of the one exception of a commercial property on Grand in the district. And so it makes sense that we grant them a variance and allow the backlit signs.
Commissioners,
So-
discuss? Yes.
Right. I guess from both commissioners, I'm looking for a little more info. I mean, the reason I amended my motion was in looking at the building. It's clear. I actually think with the front, absolutely, because it will actually hide
I think
part
they're
of-
agreeing with you.
Oh, okay. I didn't quite get that, but
They're-
okay.
I believe I believe that they are successfully putting onto the record the reason why they're allowing a backlit
A
sign
backlit sign.
as opposed to the standards themselves.
Okay,
Okay.
got it.
Motion has been made, remade, seconded.
Reiterate what the motion was, the final one that we're voting.
Motion is to approve the two signs, the one on that side, the one on the front, but not the little domino, which is going to be pounded into historic brick.
Oh. I can live with that, okay.
Commi- Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no? Sorry. No. Commissioner Robinson, yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Kennedy, yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Vines, yes or no?
Yes.
4 yeses, the staff's denial is overturned, and the reason for the variance is stated on the record. Yes, sir, your question?
On the side, so the side sign then is not allowed?
That side sign's fine. It's the little domino over the door, to the side of the door,
No.
isn't it?
Shenandoah?
The Shenandoah sign, no.
So could we put that inside of a window instead of on the brick?
Yeah, we don't look at things inside windows.
Yeah.
So we could
So you can do it, yeah, you can do it.
Be as tacky as you want.
Okay, commissioners, proceeding. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
We're pretty excited.
Great rehab.
You can't tell, we're not, like, Yeah, we're excited.
We're excited.
Commissioners, the people who were going to present agenda items E and F are not here tonight. However, I have learned in the course of due diligence that Alderman Kennedy actually has a special connection to one of these, so I'd like him to make a motion for both of these. And you should, after you've made your motion, explain why you are connected to them.
So then, the motion would be that the Preservation Board direct the staff to prepare a report for the State Historic Preservation Office, because the property meets requirements of the National Register.
That's for Stockstrom House and for Wilkinson School?
And Wilkinson School.
Is there a second?
Second.
And why Wilkinson School in particular?
I taught at Wilkinson School.
No way.
When I first came back from Howard University, and I taught, it was the foreign language exchange center. They taught German, Spanish, and French, and I taught Kiswahili. And one of my students was Sam Dotson, when he was in the 5th grade.
Who?
Really?
I informed him that this was being discussed tonight, and he has twice texted Swahili greetings.
Yes, he had.
Is he a good student?
He was a very good student, even today.
Wow.
Okay, Commissioners, there's a motion on the floor. It's been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Commissioners, we have no further business that I can think of. Can any of you think of any other business? Thinking of no further business, to hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And seconded. And without discussion, we stand adjourned. Thank you. And thank you very much for